Good morning and a big warm welcome to the first ever virtual joint NNPCF and Contact Parent Carer Forums conference. I'm Carolyn Deveney, Head of Parent Carer Participation at Contact. Those of you who attended last year's conference in person will know that it was successful despite the disruption caused by the general election in Purda, floods and trains not running that resulted in agenda changes right up to the point of us opening the conference. We are resourceful and with a team effort we pulled it off. Who could have imagined what this year would bring? Last year seems to have been a practice for our skills in adaptability, and as we're all too aware, this year we've been faced with a global pandemic and a face-to-face conference hasn't been possible. We're really disappointed not to be able to meet you all face-to-face and to network as only forums can. So we've adapted and we're delighted to be able to offer you a packed week of workshops, webinars, keynote speeches and question and answer sessions based on the feedback that you provided. It's not quite the same, but it's the next best thing. And being virtual, we've been able to attract some high-profile speakers this year, as we could do pre-record or do live sessions to suit their availability. And we have you, the forum members, as a captive audience during lockdown. A big thank you to everyone who's shown their enthusiasm for the programme and booked onto the sessions over the week. We look forward to a shared week of learning. However, on a serious note, 2020 has been a year like no other, and we appreciate that life has been even more challenging for forum members and their families, and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. Forum members continue to amaze and inspire us. You're still managing to do some vital work locally to ensure that services meet families' needs and keep things ticking over. Unsurprisingly, mental health was the topic most asked for at the conference. But as this was so open-ended, we will be running an exploratory session during conference week to unpick what this means to forum members and what will help them to look after their mental health so that we can design something to meet your needs. It's such a vital topic that it can't be overlooked. This year has brought home to everyone that mental health, as much as physical health, cannot be taken for granted. In the times when we've needed our friends and families the most and to pull together, we've not been able to see them. We need to look after ourselves and each other and help to reduce loneliness and isolation. Forums have played a huge role in their local areas this year to keep parent carers connected and to provide valuable signposting. I'll now hand you over to Tina Emery, co-chair of the NNPCF, to give you a flavour of the week to come.
Good morning and thank you for joining us. We have a packed week and thank you to forums who participated in the surveys to let us know what you wanted to find out more about, what you wanted to learn about. So we do have a very packed agenda this week. So we do have IPSI that are giving a exclusive training session, which will be happening midweek, and then we have Russell Viner, which is following on to this presentation. We have not one minister in attendance, but two, and we are also looking at diversity and how we can come together across different communities within our local area. I'll hand you over to Amanda.
Great, thanks Tina, and thank you Carolyn, and welcome from me to the National Conference too. I'm Amanda, I'm Contact's CEO, and I'm really looking forward to the week. I'm really sorry not to be able to see and chat with you though, so do keep in touch on Twitter or just drop me an email if there's stuff you want to raise. So I'm just going to cover a couple of points, highlights from the annual report in my slot, because I think conference really is an opportunity just to look above the parapet a bit and think about what else is going on across the country and where your experience as a forum sits with that. But before I do, I really just have to acknowledge what a year it's been. And Mrunal is going to talk in a moment a little bit more about the impact of COVID for families and forums. So I thought I'd just reflect a little bit more personally about what the pressures of the pandemic have meant for the actual work of co-production. And the year has no doubt brought huge pressures for you, for your families, for your work, and for the work you do in the forums. And at Contact, we do deliver some sessions on leadership and resilience for forums. And I think one of the real challenges of resilience and the work that you do is that co-production is all about relationships with each other, with families in your area, and with decision makers. And when times, I thought this first cartoon on this slide was apt. The writing says, does it work with everybody's schedule to be more vulnerable from 2:15 to 2:30 next Thursday? And I think if only that was true, because we all know when our resilience is down, we're more irritated, we're more vulnerable. And that's such a challenge when our work is all about relationships and we're all working remotely and can't check in with each other in quite the same way. But congratulations for getting through the year so far. Remember that resilience doesn't mean being superhuman. It doesn't mean getting everything right all the time. It means the ability to bounce back, to come back from adversity. So in the second cartoon, I should stress that I see the forum as the candle, not the woman. And the point of that is just to really just kind of say, you know, we don't get it right all the time. We all need to find a way to restore and to rest. But I really salute your grit and your persistence in just carrying on and being there for families into 2021. So let's have a look now just at the bigger picture and look at a few highlights from the annual report. So if we could move on to the next slide, because really I think this is an opportunity just to really celebrate the amazing kind of collective achievements. So can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this just shows you level of co-production over the last year. 66 of you describe your relationship with education partners as a co-productive one, and that's a really good increase on last year. You can still see that social care and health are a bit behind, but again, over the last 5 years, I've been coming to this conference, I've seen health kind of go up that list. And then on the next slide, I just picked out the pie chart which shows forum involvement in inspections and revisit processes. And I put that up there just to kind of reflect that it's one small pie chart that reflects such a lot of work and such important work, which is fantastic. And then the third point on the next slide, I don't think you'll be able to see that clearly, but it was the breakdown of how forums have reached out to hard to reach groups, which is also really impressive. And of course, one of the other big global events of this year has been the Black Lives Matter campaign. And that's really prompted me to reflect on what it means to be genuinely inclusive and representative in our work. And of course, that's not a new challenge, but I found some of the literature and thought output from that campaign really thought-provoking and challenging, actually. So I really recognise that if I am not part of the solution, I am part of the problem. And I think the diversity trust session that Tina mentioned later in the week will be a really interesting opportunity to explore some of that. I also wanted just to flag I thought the example from Brighton and Hove Forum in the annual report around the work they've done to involve families from traveller communities in the forum was really impressive. So take a look at that when you're reading through. And then the final slide, I just wanted to end by reminding you of some of the other things that Contact does. I know for some of you, we are the people that just bug you about your grant monitoring, and that's important. But we also provide a wider range of support. And in terms of Contact's pandemic response, we have scaled up our services working with families. And I've just included on this slide some of the new services that we might be able to work with you on to best support families in your area. So just to pick out on the top right hand side of the slide, a new listening ear service. This is appointments that are bookable on Eventbrite, evening or day. Families can have multiple appointments, and it's a service designed for families that are just feeling really overwhelmed with everything. Can just talk and cry, rant, but also work through with an advisor to try and start working through some of those emotional challenges and find some practical strategies to move forward. That's a free service. It's something families can book into themselves, or you can book for them, and it might be helpful to refer families to alongside the work you're doing with them. Second thing below that is our COVID pages on the website are always up to date. Do take a look to save yourself writing the same content. We try and keep that as constantly up to date. And then the other, over the summer, we've run online sessions, group sessions with parents, over 2,000 parents on a range of topics around the common challenges. So things like getting routines, behaviour, sleep and well-being. We run those for free where we can fundraise to run them, and they're also available to commission. And if you'd like to work with us on that, we'd be really keen to. And then finally, we really recognise that forums have been really important to families during the pandemic and really have stepped up. So we've been able to use our relationship with the Pears Foundation to draw in an extra £1 million for forums and rare condition support groups in the form of a new grant programme. It's been really quick this year, so applications actually closed today for this year, but it will be open again from April for grants of between 5 and 15k to support your work with families locally. So I think that's pretty much it from me. We're committed going forward to working alongside the NNPCF to ensure that families' voices are heard at a national level, and I think we've through the Disabled Children's Partnership, we have a piece on the 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock BBC News Tonight on back to school experiences of young disabled people that you might be interested to watch. But for now, thank you for everything you do. Your tenacity and your desire to just do all you can to support families in your area is really inspiring, and I look forward to the rest of the week and to seeing you again on Friday. So many thanks, and I'm going to hand over to Mrunal, co-chair from the NNPCF.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Tina and Carolyn as well. So I'm Mrunal Sisodia. I'm the other co-chair of the NNPCF, and I've got the somewhat unenviable task of trying to review the year. So if you cast your mind back to 1 year ago, and on the next slide, you'll see that I'm asking you to enter your TARDIS and think back, if you can, to what it was like in November last year. So both Tina and Carolyn have already referenced a very chaotic conference, and in amongst all the difficulties that parent carers and families were facing, because it has been a really, really difficult few years for our families, and there's no point in us saying that it's been anything other than that. There were some things that we had cause for optimism about. There was an extra 700 million for SEND for the high needs funding pot from Sajid Javid. Remember him? He was the Chancellor a year ago. There was the NHS long-term plan, which was kicking off and doing a lot of things that were good and necessary for our kids. And then on the horizon, there was the SEND review. But then a couple of things happened. Firstly, there's the election, which we all seem to have forgotten. And then, of course, there was coronavirus. So really, we have been massively overtaken by events. And frankly, we wrote a business plan as the NNPCF in February last year. And the first thing that's happened, we did to it in April. At the start of the real year was to throw it all in the bin, because we've just done completely different things this year. So let's talk a little bit about coronavirus. I don't think we can avoid that this year. So on the next slide, I've just sort of outlined some of the impacts that coronavirus has had on our families. And as I said before, it really wasn't a particularly rosy picture before coronavirus arrived. But what's actually happened, and what we've heard from you and witnessed and lived ourselves, because remember, we're all parent carers, is the fact that coronavirus has really doubled down on those that are already disadvantaged, including children and families with special educational needs and disabilities. I don't need to list for you what's happened, because we've all seen it, we've all lived it, and you've told us. But the key things have been that the many services that we depend upon have just not been around. They've just not been available. And we've been withdrawn for many, many reasons, some good, some bad. And the really disappointing thing for us has been that actually under stress, what we've found is that all too often co-production with families was non-existent. And what we found is that in some areas where co-production has been really well embedded, it's actually been used to help families through this desperate time. But where co-production has not been well embedded, either at a strategic level or at an individual level, we've found too often it's gone out of the window. And that, again, has added pressure on families at what's been a desperate time. But as I describe on the next slide, parent care reforms have risen to the challenge. Amanda said that, we're not superheroes, but actually watching what you guys have done over this last year, I'm not sure I believe that. I think you are superheroes in some way. We've just pivoted. We've adapted to the new circumstances. We've demonstrated the resilience that we know that every single parent and carer of a child or young person with a special educational need has, that we have to demonstrate through every single day of our lives. And we've applied that to the work we do. And we've changed the way we work, and we've continued to serve our communities and represent our communities and co-produce in new and innovative ways. And we keep on highlighting the issues, and you guys have kept doing that for us. But there are a couple of important bullets coming up now, which are actually the biggest achievements of all. The biggest achievements we've made sometimes haven't actually been necessarily the work we've been doing or the glorious things that we've been doing, the innovation, but have actually been, as it says in these two bullets here, just carrying on, just being a mum or a dad in these circumstances, and just being able to continue the work of the forum. On the next slides, there you go, popped up there. On the next slides, your work has meant that we've had a greater impact than ever before. And we are, one thing I always say, and Tina always says as well, is that without the work you do, us and the NNPCF steering group are just 10 gas bags in a room spouting off. It's the work that you do, the evidence you provide, the stories you've supplied us that allow us to make the difference that we do. So this year, I think we've had a greater reach and bigger impact than ever before, partly because of the virus, but partly because of the fantastic work that you've done. So some of the examples of where we've made a difference. So very early on in the pandemic, we heard from you and we challenged the use of clinical frailty scales and do not resuscitate notices that were being applied to some people with special educational needs and learning difficulties. We changed guidance. We worked with the Learning Disability and Autism workstream to change guidance to accommodate the needs of those with SEND, so that, for example, you could have more than one person supporting you when you went out for a walk. You could go out for a walk more than once if you had special needs. In the schools guidance, we inserted language that emphasised the need to co-produce with families. The £1 billion of catch-up funding that was announced by the government for schools, we got inserted into there the fact that funding could be spent on services other than just academic catch-up. So things like SALT and education psychology services are included in that catch-up funding. And we kept on banging on about the fact that school guidance, return to school guidance, had to emphasise a holistic approach and not just focus on attendance and behaviour. And that's been reflected in some of the guidance that's been issued. So your work has enabled us to actually make these differences. So you should be incredibly proud of what you've been doing. On the next slide, we recognise, though, we can't stop there. That actually our work's got to continue into the next year. And we've set the following priorities as an organisation, as the NNPCF. And we'll say more about these in the coming weeks and months as we develop our plans for the coming years. And our four priorities are very simply, we can't get away from COVID, but we've got to support the recovery from COVID. The next thing is the big game in town is the NHS long-term plan. We've got to engage with the long-term plan and make sure it delivers what we need for our children. We're going to continue to work with Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission around the current round of inspections that are going on and visits that are going, and then also defining what the next round, the next phase looks like. So those inspections have been instrumental in raising the profile of SEND and the quality of services across the country. And last but not least, it's the SEND review again, which is stalled because of the election and because of COVID. And we're going to be focusing very heavily on that. As I said, you'll hear more about all of these things over the coming week, because we've got these are all themes that we're picking up in the conference week, and we hope that you'll learn a great deal from what our speakers and our guests and our workshops have to say on each of these issues. And then the final slide is, please enjoy the week. We've got a really great lineup. Being online is different. It's certainly been a learning curve for us, putting on an event like this, but it does mean that we can do some things a little differently. As Tina and Carolyn hinted at, it means we can get more people involved with our reach. Also means that we can get more people to come present to you as well. So we're presenting a really wide program of events, and we are sorry that we can't see you in person, but we're trying to do the next best thing, which is give you a phenomenal experience online. So please, from all four of us, please enjoy the week. We'll speak to you again on Friday to try and review some of the things that we've been through, and hang in there, and we'll all be back stronger next year. Thank you.